Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to Horse 2 Cinema. So today I've got a little bit of a different kind of review. It's still going to be a movie review for a movie that just came out, but what I'm actually want to do with this one is I kind of want to compare a little bit this movie to the original 1947 version. This movie is Nightmare Alley, directed by Guillermo del Toro, and the 1947 film was directed by Edmund Golding. So I was really excited for this new 2021 film. I'm a big fan of Del Toro, just the way he can put together a production. I thought The Shape of Water was a really interesting movie, and I need to check out Pan's Labyrinth and a bunch of other things that he's made. And since I was excited for this, in preparation, I decided to watch the original 1947 version. Basically, how this story came into fruition is in 1946 there was a book that was written, and then 1 year later it was adapted into a film, and now we're getting a remake of that same film. Now it's rare, I think, when we talk about remakes for the new one to be better than the original. I would say it's exceedingly rare. I can think of so many modern remakes that have just completely disappointed me compared to what the original provided, but there are a few that I think are better than the original. The three that come to mind for me are the 2006 version of Casino Royale, which is much better than the 1967 version. That's basically just like a spoof of James Bond. It's not even really like a official movie or anything. The early 2000s version of Ocean's 11 I think is better than the original. This isn't technically a remake, but I think Evil Dead 2 can almost be considered a remake because it's basically Sam Raimi doing the same story with a little bit of a better budget since he had established himself as a filmmaker. I love the first Evil Dead, but I think Evil Dead 2 is slightly better in what he wanted to go for with the horror comedy stuff. And then a couple others that I've heard are better than the original, but I just haven't seen these movies, are John Carpenter's The Thing and David Cronenberg's The Fly. But overall, I would say it's pretty rare because when you have to adapt a source material, there are certain things that you have to change because you don't want it to be exactly like the original version. But in doing that, you're sort of complicating things with regards to the message of the story, or the feel of it, or just overall how effective it is as a film. But in this case of Nightmare Alley, I think we actually do have a rare case where the remake is better than the original, having seen both films recently. So let's start off with the premise. The general premise is there's this guy named Stan who is a recent nomad, and he recently has found work at a carnival. In the 1947 version, we start out at the carnival, and in the 2021 version, we see something that happened beforehand that sort of led him to work at the carnival. And as he gets a job at the carnival and sort of learns its very seedy, dark ways, he learns this technique that this woman Xena teaches him called basically is mentalism. It's sort of like fortune telling, but basically you sort of guess things about somebody, and you can convince them that you can sort of get in touch with higher spirits and affect their lives. But as he discovers this, it sort of leads him down a very, very dark and irreversible path. I don't want to say too much else about the plot. I'd recommend you checking out the film for yourself. I'll compare this to the original movie at the end of the video a little bit in terms of what I think the new one did better. But I just want to talk about the general positives first. Like any Guillermo del Toro movie, I don't know if anybody in Hollywood does production design better than him. Just the way he builds sets that feel very like grand and wow, this really took them a long time to build sort of thing, but also kind of feels grounded and extremely real. Like it looks like you could just grab the sets. That's extremely present in this movie. Early in the film, there's this sequence where the carnival workers tell Stan that he needs to go and fetch the geek out of this carnival set. And he goes into it, and it's basically like this big, it's this giant devil, and then its mouth opens, and everything about it just looks so real and dark, like a carnival would look at the time. The 1947 version also had this kind of same sense of wonder in a way, especially for what they could actually do at the time, since they didn't have color yet. So I'm not criticizing that earlier film for that. I just think that how the production design comes off to the audience is a lot more grand in sort of this new movie. But in addition to just like the sets of the production design, the people that they use at the carnival, the sort of gifted people that can do all these crazy things, they actually use real people for that. The best example is there's this shot that sort of shows the different people that work at the carnival, and it kind of goes down a line of them, and you see this guy who's basically like the snake of the carnival, and he's basically a human that's a contortionist. And this is actually a real person who was on, I believe, America's Got Talent at one point, doing his act. Also, the performances by the actors in this movie are excellent. The ones I really, really liked, there were a good few of them, but Cate Blanchett is amazing. Rooney Mara gives a really good performance. I'll talk about her character a little bit later in terms of issues I had with the film. And then some of my two favorite actors and actresses of all time, Toni Collette and Willem Dafoe, are just wonderful in this movie. Willem Dafoe plays a character that I think he's just really perfect at playing which is just this like kind of country dude who has a very dark, seedy side to him. He sort of teaches Stan about these sort of dark things he can do to manipulate people. And he sets him along this very irreversible path. Also, what I really liked is the mentalism scenes in this movie, where Bradley Cooper's character Stan is sort of getting in the heads of audience members at both the carnival, and later he travels along and does this all over the United States. I thought there was like a meta quality to these scenes, because the way he's manipulating these characters' emotions is very similar to how just movies work. Movies are sort of an escape, so while you're in this room for 2 hours, you're being manipulated by the screen in the same way that a mentalist would manipulate somebody to feel certain emotions. Movies do the exact same thing. I hope the movie was really self-aware about that, because I thought it was a really cool idea. I like when filmmakers can sort of like, can sort of deconstruct like how movies make people feel, and what exactly it does to your perception of both time and emotions as well. In terms of things I didn't like about the movie, there's a couple, I would say. As I kind of alluded to, one of my issues revolves around Rooney Mara's character, who's essentially Stan's love interest in the movie. And it's not that their relationship doesn't work, it does. I mean, you can totally see their fascination with each other in the first act. But then their relationship starts to sour as the film goes on, as they get deeper into this dark path that they've been set on. And Rooney Mara's character does things that are understandable from the audience's point of view, but they're not really delved into that much. I would say that her character isn't as developed as it could be, and I really would have liked to have seen some scenes earlier on where we kind of got into the nitty-gritty emotions that she was feeling, as, that would later reveal why she would do things that she does later in the film. Also, in terms of acting, I didn't praise Bradley Cooper's performance in when I was talking about the actors. I think he was really good in the movie. I actually did like his performance. I just kept thinking that was one of the things I preferred about the 1947 movie. I think Tyrone Power is his name. He was so good. He has this much more like he has this approach of like he's basically like a serial entrepreneur that will manipulate people in any way he can. I really felt that he brought that sense to the screen a little bit better than Bradley Cooper did. I kind of didn't understand why Bradley Cooper used a southern accent, or a sort of Texas accent in the movie as well. But it's hard to compare, because Tyrone Power was just so good. And actually, one of the reasons that the 1947 movie became popular, because it didn't do well when it first came out, the reason that it became popular is after Tyrone Power died, basically this movie sort of, people were going back and looking at his career, and they wanted to sort of, remember his great performances, and so this movie got very popular again. So now it's time to compare the two movies, where I really think this 2021 version excelled, and that is kind of the third act and basically the ending of the movie. There are things that this movie does that simply would not have been allowed to be depicted on screen in 1947, particularly the violence and sort of and at times sort of the sexual scenes as well. Early on in the movie, there's a lot of sexual stuff that happens with Stan, as well as Toni Collette's character, Rooney Mara eventually, and even Cate Blanchett at one point. And towards the end of the film, it's actually quite violent as well. And these things, while I prefer that they're in the original version because I think it's more true to the book, it's more true to this dark story, I won't exactly criticize it for not being in 1947, because that is just kind of like, very few movies were like that at the time, and audiences just would have absolutely hated it. But what I will praise about this 2021 film that it did differently than the 1947 film, that I actually will prefer this new one over, is the ending. The ending of this movie is incredibly dark, and it's also a lot more true to the ending of the book. And even though this ending is in the novel, basically the people who adapted the 1947 version, the filmmakers wanted to put this in the movie, but from what I understand, the studio was like, if you put this in the movie, it's just going to be too depressing for anyone to go see, and so you sort of have to end it on a happy note. And I just really didn't like that about the version, because it contradicts everything the movie is trying to say. And while I understand that audiences at the time maybe couldn't accept violence and sex the way we can now, I think, there were dark, depressing movies made around that time. I think Citizen Kane's a really good example. I don't think it was completely necessary in the way that taking out the violence and the sex was. I would sort of compare this to what I've heard about Breakfast at Tiffany's. So I haven't read that book, but from what I understand, the book actually has a lot more to say about sort of the dark themes at the time that the movie just pretty much glosses over because they didn't want to depict it. There's things about homosexuality, there's this sort of plot that Holly's character is basically a call girl, and the 60s movie, I think, pretty much left that out, whereas the book kept it in. I would say the 1947 film is a very similar version of that, but imagine if they remade Breakfast at Tiffany's today, made it more true to the book. That's what Nightmare Alley, this 2021 version, is, and I really liked it. I think it was one of the best films that came out in 2021, and I just remember after I went to see it with my girlfriend, we were talking about it for like a couple hours afterward, and I can say that about very few movies that I saw this year, even the ones I really liked. So although I do have a couple issues with this new version, it's also kind of long for some people. I don't really care about that. I thought it was paced pretty well. Although I have those issues with it, what it did for this story compared to what the 1947 version did, I really prefer, and for that, I'm going to give it an A. So yeah, if Nightmare Alley's playing in a theater near you, I don't know where all it's playing right now. It's at a local indie theater in my hometown. I would seriously recommend checking it out. It's a great time. I do think it's one of the best movies of the year. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'd like to do more videos like this where I'm sort of comparing, if I've seen both versions of a film, sort of compare the two. I recently saw the original Blade Runner. Maybe I'll do that with like Blade Runner, the 80s one, and then 2049 or something. I don't know. I'll come up with something. But yeah, anyway, that's it for this video. Make sure and like the video down below, subscribe if you'd like, and I will see you guys in the next one.